don't know, guys and gals, if this is being overplayed, but apparently with the slew of regulations that's going to come in Angela Rayner's workers' rights bill, she wants to roll out even more diversity officers in the workplace whose job would be to ensure that nothing harmful or distressing gets said within the hearing of someone who may be harmed or distressed by it. What does that even mean? Who is the arbiter of what is harmful and distressing? What is that? I mean, it's worse than living under the auspices of the Stasi, this nonsense. Let's speak now to Alan Miller, co-founder of the brilliant Together Declaration. I mean, that's me done for, Alan, except I actually work with super sound people and we have all sorts of banter during the advert breaks, which if this was played out commercially, we'd be in huge trouble. But if they wanted to trot off to HR and say, you never guess what Alex said during that commercial, I could find myself being thrown out of the building faster than a Lord knows what. But for other people, this is potentially going to become a real threat.
It's a terrible situation, Alex. We've already seen since 2021 there has been a 45% increase in tribunals around this specific issue of banter. So the overly monitoring and legalizing the relationships between people in the workplace because of things that people say. And they will say, Angela Rayner and this government, well, it's not really about free speech, it's explicitly about harassment. But of course, when you start saying a woman is a woman, or you believe in other things and you say those things, people then say, well, words are violence and that's distressing and harmful and that's harassment. And we've seen it play out in lots of ways. We saw it this weekend, both in Leeds and in London. We saw a young man called Monty arrested because he had a placard saying trans equals mental illness. Now, people may agree or disagree. The Cash report said some things, but the police, who've got some of these initiatives already at Hendon Training College around DEI and ESG, arrested him for having that placard. We've seen consistently a situation where there's a two-tier approach to what people can and can't say. You're allowed to say some things. They can be very, very insulting to the state, to Britain, to our institutions, to women, to all sorts of people. But if you say other things, then the good and the great, the technocrats who love DEI, will say that's being harmful or prejudiced or racist. You know, if you have a conversation, let's imagine around the water cooler, that you think too many people are coming in the country. Is that then being racist? And this problem that you have a situation where increasingly lawyers get involved in our relationships and then taxpayers pick up the bill, less working time, it puts enormous pressure on businesses who are going to be worried about the fact they'll be held accountable. If you own a bar and people come in and say some things, and let's be honest, people say all sorts of things in a bar, and long may that live. But now if a security guard or someone hears you saying something or someone complains, you can have your license put under pressure. And in the same way, in any kind of SME, and we should remember, Alex, that in Britain, small and medium-sized enterprises are the vast composition of the businesses in Britain. They can't afford this sort of thing. We're having an exodus of millionaires that are leaving the country, tens of thousands of them, people going to Dubai and Portugal. And this is, on the one hand, an Orwellian Brave New World moment where you're not even allowed to think certain things. You're certainly not allowed to say them. We have to unthink. We have to self-censor until we stop saying things. You wouldn't last 5 minutes in most workplaces, Alex, saying, I wouldn't, with these conversations. The people will go, that's outrageous. It's utterly unacceptable. Being polite, being civil, we just have some ideas that, you know, if one happens to think, look, people have different views about abortion and right, you know, pro-life or pro-abortion, but if you mention something, you say something, or even if you've watched a TV show and you chat to your friend about it at work, all of a sudden, all of those areas are policed, and it's terrifying, right? We often point to China and other places to say, look what's going on, but we're having it here. And that's why at Together and a Together Declaration, we've got the Digital Bill of Rights at the moment, because we're saying that from the Online Safety Act to debanking, to the fact that people are being tracked constantly. We don't want a social credit system, right? We don't think it's too concerning to say, look, too dramatic to say, look at what's happened already in the last 5 years. Look at what's happened around Southport, two-tier justice and policing, people imprisoned for social media posts, some not imprisoned for all sorts of violent acts. And we've not got something that's, even if it was without fear or favour, that police should be, and it's not at the moment, even if it was that, it would still be an encroachment that's too far. We've seen Scotland's got the Hate Crime Act, right? The Hate Crime Act, where if you say something at home now, you could be arrested for that. We need to all, I'd really encourage your viewers to get involved with Together, togetherdeclaration.org, and say, we must have our liberty and freedom and privacy. Those, by the way, when everyone talks about the far right, that if you like free speech now it's far right, that our grandparents fought actual Nazis.
This is it. They gaslight us. They gaslight us because, actually, if you wanted to think of what the far right is, the concept of right wing is a small state and more freedom. So if you're going to go even further down the spectrum on that, you actually get to libertarianism, where people can do what they like. It's the far left who censor. And, I don't want to turn this into some sort of gender war. But the point is this, with regards to the young man who got arrested with, with the trans flag saying this is mental illness, last time I checked, dysphoria was a psychological condition, right?
Absolutely,
so it seems to me that that's fact. But when you talk about people being thrown out of pubs for unpopular beliefs, I've seen a lot of women from organisations such as Let Women Speak, who might have congregated in a pub after a demonstration, being the ones who were forced out. And a lot of this woke stuff, a lot of the culture wars, the end victim often tends to be a woman, and I'll explain why. When you have people worried about male rapists going into female prisons, it is to protect women. When you're worried about the sort of overhyping of gender dysphoria and puberty blockers and top surgery, this is to stop kids being mutilated. And we know that 75% of teens reporting to gender clinics at one point were little girls, when actually gender dysphoria previously in history has predominantly been a male condition. When we talk about the riots after Southport, it was because it was little girls being massacred by terrorists, as it was when they targeted the Ariana Grande concert. When we talk about grooming gangs, guess what? It's little girls being raped. In the culture wars, this is largely about people standing up and saying we cannot allow these sadistic, warped attitudes and ideas and neo-ideologies and newborn religions to take hold in this country because it actually imperils girls. Now, I managed to live in an era during the point where, the sort of ladette culture where girls were as good as guys, girl power, you could drink a pint of lager. 90s was like peak civilization. I feel we've gone back to an era now that's pre-suffragette.
Yeah, well, we've got a very insulting attitude towards it, and and this is partly the speech codes as well. It's presented as though, like, often, poor women shrinking violence, they couldn't possibly listen to certain things, but actually many of the things you said you're bang on about. And we should remember that it's been women, again, brave women, the nurses that have had to sue their unions to not have someone who's, a man going into a female toilet, a trans person. We've seen a situation where a nurse was called the N-word because of what she said, and she's had to sue her own union. And part of what this legislation is going to mean is that unions get far more encroaching opportunities in the workplace, which consistently is dominated by a lot of this diversity, equality and inclusion. And they sound like nice words, but what they end up doing is fragmenting us. Our whole the things that are so great about Britain, the things that we've won through the Enlightenment, through the Renaissance, liberty, freedom, privacy, rights, they're universal things. They're not about what colour we are or whether we're Christian or anything else. But it is a Christian country, or at least it's meant to be. And it is the case that we should have a shared legacy. And what happens is we have a situation where it increasingly encourages people to firstly have legal transactional relationships where they prosecute one another, to not be robust and resilient and say, well, you know what? I disagree, I'm Tottenham or I'm West Ham. I think this, you think that, that's work. We have a laugh, we have a bit of banter. The terrifying thing about all of this is that now people end up self-censoring. It's what the intention is. I think this, but I'm not going to say that. It's like when they said there were shy Tories and then they were so surprised about Brexit.
I think it goes even further than that. I agree. It is. We're already in prison, all of us, because we're in the prison of our minds. So we don't only just self-censor, that there are some of us thinking, gosh, I have a feeling that this might actually be true, but I don't want to say it out loud. There's also a cohort of people out there who have swallowed all of this left-wing nonsense so wholeheartedly that they don't even think it. They don't even think it. I know plenty of, especially middle-class women, I ain't picking on them, but it's true, who sign up to all this refugees welcome, trans lives matter stuff, because they haven't even questioned it or analysed it. Reality is so far away, it's a dot on the horizon to these people.
And that's why it's so important, Alex, that I think people get involved in the campaign. You should definitely come to us at togetherdeclaration.org. It's on everything. It's on cash. It's on tracking with central bank digital currency. It's on facial surveillance. They say, and this is the thing for us to be aware of as well, they say it's to stop fraud or stop crime or protect borders or to stop the... But we've seen CCTV everywhere, and yet all these things you're describing still happen.
Right.
We know that the boats are not going to get stopped by us having tracking digital ID. It will be us in Britain, the citizens, that will have it done on us. And it's really important that we remind people of the legacy, of our provenance, of our history, of freedoms and liberty and rights that we've all have a duty to uphold and defend, and to say the difficult things, to have courage and to say them in our workplaces to one another as friends, but also to our neighbours, and to reject these attempts to shut down speech, to make us all be automatons. It's unhuman, it's unfair, unnecessary, and we need to challenge and stop it together.
Totally agree. Alan, you are such a hero of mine. What you do is exceptional and so important. Alan Miller, co-founder of the Together Declaration.